How are you doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. And what we're going to talk about today is traditionalist nostalgia versus women in the workforce. So we're kind of talking about this kind of nostalgic idea around traditionalism, or what people define as traditionalism, which is going to be very subjective to that particular person, their ideas, and their group, and the reality of women in the workforce, and sometimes how these opposing ideologies or these opposing views on the world, it's creating a lot of anxiety. It's creating a lot of frustration in a lot of people, because I think a lot of people are trying to attach themselves to something that they can't really achieve. And so what we're going to try to go into, and I really want to get some feedback from the audience around why are so many people attached to this traditionalist idea, even though it doesn't match the reality of the current world that we're living in. And if they want to get back to this traditionalist idea, are they willing to accept certain facts around that particular type of reality, right? So really quickly, let's go into the first slide of the particular discussion. So there's a big idea across multiple segments that states that America will be better off if women go back to this 1950s homemaker archetype, or another big idea that they're kind of like overlapping is that if a man cannot make you a homemaker, he's not fit for marriage. And you want to ask yourselves, where do these people get these ideas from in 2023? Right? Listen to a younger guy on YouTube, I want to say maybe about a week ago, and he was stating that, one of the biggest problems in America is that women are sacrificing motherhood and childbirth to go to school and to get educated. And he believed that America would be better off if women just stayed at home, had children, and took care of the family. Then you have also a contingent of people that believe that if a man doesn't drive enough income into the household, he's not fit for marriage. If you notice, they never say he's not fit for sex. If you notice, they never say he's not fit for children, but they create this narrative that marriage is this kind of like this high level goal that only this special person in society is fit for. But if you notice, they never say if a man can't make you a homemaker, he's not fit to have access to their vagina. So what you kind of hear is this very kind of weird narratives that are going around. But I want to kind of ask the people in the audience, because I know some of them do believe in some of this stuff, and I'm not saying they're right or wrong. What I'm trying to figure out is where this comes from. And if you believe in this particular type of nostalgia, how do we think America gets here based on the current reality that's not just culturally, but it's also based on the socioeconomic system that we live in? But really quickly, before we get into that, we want to go into the sponsor of the show, right? So the sponsor of the show, if you already, kind of tapping on a regular basis, it's going to be www.thehighestpaid.online. But today we're going to be sponsored by www.optionstraining.info. And the reason why we're being sponsored by them is because a lot of people have reached out to me and they've asked about when I will be ever having like a one-on-one, not a one-on-one, but a live training, right? So people have reached out to me, say, when are you going to have a live training? So we've finally been able to put something together for a live training. It's going to be October 21st, 2023. So this is going to be for people who want to learn about options in a live setting and they're serious about their financial future. This is going to be October 21st, 2023 in Atlanta, Georgia. The event will only seat 30 people. So after the 30 people are sold, the event's going to be closed off. And the reason why I'm doing this is because this is going to be something that we're going to kind of use as a foundation to build larger and larger events in 2024. So I want to get 30 people into the room maximum, being able to actually teach them and figure out how I'm going to create my protocol and how I'm going to create my my processes. Now, this is not the first time I've taught people live. I started off teaching people one-on-one via live stream. So I used to teach my course one-on-one for 3 hours before I started going to like the online module type course. So I'm not new to teaching people, right? So I want people to really understand that. So here's some of what you're going to learn at this options training: how to use the options market to finance your dream lifestyle, the #1 secret to safeguarding the money you make in trading, why the options market is a hidden gem most people overlook, and how to develop the power of waking up and knowing that you'll make money in the market. So the goal is to make sure that you leave with a solid understanding of how to successfully leverage the options market to get the life that you desire. And you don't have to figure this out all by yourself and learn how to try to trade options all on your own, right? So go to that website. It's going to be essentially a lander. It'll allow you to sign up. It's still kind of rough. We're still building it out, but I wanted to get that out to you as we continue to build out our marketing assets. But that's going to be October 21st, 2023. Okay, so that's going to be the sponsor of this particular show. Let's go on to what we were talking about previously, and let's get right into it. So we talked about before, right? This big idea that states that America would be better off if women go back to this 1950s homemaker archetype. And if a man cannot make you a homemaker, he's not fit for marriage. Okay. So what's interesting is we have many different groups. Some people use the term disparate groups who have very little in common promoting the same big idea. And that's what's always was interesting to me about this big idea was that all these different groups who don't have a lot in common except that they believe in this particular idea. And they have this belief that if we can just roll society back to this period that they think society was better, which is really the power of nostalgia, everything would be better for me individually and us as a group. And part of their appeal is that, well, I'm going to sell a woman classes on how to get back to this particular era. Or I'm going to advocate for men by promoting this particular era where I believe that men were their most valuable, had their most autonomy, and they enjoyed life at the most level. Or, well, I believe that women were, quote unquote, the most protected and yada, 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 back when things were like this. And it's very, very interesting, but let's kind of go into what that particular era looked like, because I think a lot of us, because we're younger, we don't really understand a lot of the marketing and the messaging behind that particular era. And where that really comes from, that marketing and that messaging, is going to be for another conversation. But it's very interesting is that this type of narrative came out of marketing. It came out of media, but people today think that this was the everyday life for the majority of people in the United States at this particular time. But let's kind of go into where this comes from, right? So really quickly, let's watch this quick video, and then what we'll do is we'll continue to go into it a little bit farther.
Housekeeping still remains the most important business of the world. It engages the hearts and minds of more people and calls for higher qualities than any other occupation. Each woman faces it single-handed. She must know how to cook, know food. She must know how to set her table attractively. She must know how to make her home comfortable and inviting. She must know the worth of labor-saving devices and how best to conserve her time and energy. She must know clothes, how to buy and how to make them. She must face death to bring children into the world. She must raise them, care for them, and pilot them safely to the threshold of manhood and womanhood. To her husband, she must be a companion, a sweetheart, a wife, and a mother. She must stir his ambition, pull him through failure, and keep success from hurting him. She must make social contacts. She must widen her own horizon and find time for culture.
Okay, so that video was from 1934. And what I want you to understand is that in the early 1900s, the majority of this country was dirt poor. Not just black people. The majority of the country was dirt poor. What created the white middle class in America is really unionized labor and government policy. That's what got so many white people out of poverty, right? It wasn't because they just worked really hard. So what people have to understand was that in 1934, they were already using, marketing. They were already using the power of film at that time, which was a very new medium to use to promote this aspirational idea that the role of a woman is to do these things, but she has to have the financial wherewithal to do those things. So what made people want that lifestyle was being promoted to them through media. It wasn't something they saw in their day-to-day life, right? So then they promoted it to them, then people start to want that, right? Because for years, women worked with their husband in partnership, but she didn't necessarily work as a housewife. Oftentimes, she had to leave outside of the home, help with the farm, help with the livestock, things of that nature. She was not doing it inside what we were calling this home, right? Because we know that most Americans really didn't get access to homes like that until after World War II. So that particular piece was from 1934, and you can probably tell by the quality of it, but it's an aspirational piece created via media, right? So let's keep going with this other piece that we want to show.
Breakfast, a time for traditional scurrying in many homes. But here's one homemaker who has everything under perfect control. Late as usual for launching, but youth will always be served. Of course, we know that families don't have a countdown for breakfast, but so many space-age marvels have been incorporated into today's modern kitchens, the homemaker could follow such exacting time schedules if she chose, free to perform a more relaxed role as home manager, while many of the routine matters function automatically. The coffee started automatically at a preset time. Now, while she goes about her normal day's activities, she will clean the oven automatically. She merely moves a lever and turns one knob. The oven will lock itself during the cleaning and cannot be reopened until the temperature inside the oven returns to normal temperature. Now to put the finishing touches on the dessert for Susan's party this afternoon. Not too surprising for this day and age, little space capsules of ice cream and cookies, topped with a...
So what you see with that piece from Frigidaire is getting people to believe that being a housewife with all these particular appliances is this very, very desired lifestyle. And so what they're doing is they're kind of selling this idea, but the goal of Frigidaire is to sell more appliances and more household items to families. So what they do is they make the housewife as this aspirational figure, and the housewife that has all these Frigidaire appliances is the aspirational figure because she has everything, right? So the question is still, it's still aspirational. It was not reality for most people. So that piece was put out like in the mid 50s. And that lifestyle was still created normally for most people through some type of organized labor movement and through government policy. Because before that, most people couldn't live that lifestyle. So the woman may have worked in partnership with her man, but she wasn't at home baking desserts and yada, 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 because she had to essentially do what it took just to survive in a particular environment. So it's very weird that in 2023, we have a lot of people advocating to go back to that. But I don't think they really understand why we no longer can live like that for the majority of the population. It's also because, like I said, most people on YouTube, the big thing is to talk relationships, but you never bring in a socioeconomic piece and people really don't understand it. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. So that's kind of what we're going to go into today, right? So this big idea has several components, right? So this big idea around women sitting in the household and being homemakers, and that's, you know, really supposed to be our ideal state. You got people on YouTube saying that that's the role of a Christian woman. Well, there were Christian women way before women can sit at home and take care of their family, right? So this, you know, like I said, a lot of people mix these things together, kind of like in a gumbo, and they come up with this idea, but its foundation really is kind of based on something they just brought out of their head, right? So the man's supposed to be the breadwinner. That's supposed to be his value. And the woman's supposed to be the good homemaker, and that's supposed to be her value. So then the question is, how is that available to people today in 2023? Right? Because if this is aspirational, there has to be some type of mechanism to get this, right? So the idea that for this format to work, the man has to be the breadwinner, which means he has to be, you know, making more money than the woman, that allows her to sit at home and not work and live this lifestyle. And that's supposed to be his value, right? Or the woman is supposed to be a good homemaker, and that's supposed to be her value. Okay. The question is, based on how this particular world works currently today, is that going to be available to the majority of people in our society? Right? And does it mean that somebody is deficient because they can't make you happy in this way. So if I'm a woman and I'm dealing with a man and he doesn't make such an exponential amount of money that he can allow me to stay at home and just take care of the house, does that mean he's non-valid or deficient in some way? Right? If I'm dealing with a woman and she's not an extremely accomplished homemaker, right, does that mean she's deficient in some way? Okay. And I think that's something that a lot of people really want to start asking themselves. Where did they now in 2023 start thinking that this is normal and this is how we should be living, when really this particular archetype and this aspirational life started in the 30s, started programming people to think they should want this. And it didn't come into reality for most people until the 50s. And it took government policy and organized labor to allow most people to live this way. Okay. So let's keep going. So the idea we talked about is based around nostalgia, does not take into account historical reality and the present reality. Now, nostalgia is extremely powerful because why? Most people will convince themselves that what happened in the past was currently better than what's going on right now because they don't enjoy what's going on right now. One of the reasons why Disney makes so much money is because it makes people think about their childhood. And a lot of people will start to believe that my childhood was better than what I'm currently dealing with now. We talked about before, me and Erica have talked about multiple times. Most people believe their life peaks out maybe mid-20s to mid-30s. And after that, because of the decision that they made, their life starts to go downhill, right? So then they long for that time again, which is why a lot of people don't ever want to really become adults. They want to stay youngsters their whole life because why? That's when they had their most fun, because the way they built their life started to crash out once they got over 30, 35 years old. So many people will start to believe that the way things were back in the day were better than they currently are now, but they're not taking into account any type of historical reality, or they're taking into account their present reality, right? Because we can't live in the past. We can only live what's going on right now. So we can take things from the past and apply them to this current situation, but they have to work for this current situation, right? So let me give an example. That's going to be very extreme, but I want you to understand something. Domestic violence laws aren't even 30 years old, maybe even 40 years old in most states, right? So you can no longer hit your wife. There was a time to where you could beat your wife up and the police wouldn't take you to jail. So somebody started advocating that we need to go back to where we got rid of all our domestic violence laws. Most people would not entertain it. But in reality, there was a time in America for a very long time to where if you were married to a woman, there was no such thing as domestic violence. Right? So you got to kind of understand is that this nostalgia that people are buying into, it doesn't really take into account historical reality. So if a woman was quote unquote more submissive to you because she was fearful that you were going to commit violence against her, right? It wasn't because things were different back then. It was because she was always under the threat of violence, right? Because there was nothing that could be done legally if you put your hands on your wife. So you got to kind of understand that a lot of people, men and women, are advocating for a particular environment. And I don't think they're just taking the pieces out of it that they think they would like, but they don't understand you're not going to just get those pieces. You're going to get the whole environment, right? So when women were not allowed to go into the workforce, and we're going to kind of talk about that, when they were not allowed to go into the workforce, they had to depend on a man to support them, right? Because they could not get jobs because of the majority of the type of jobs that existed during certain times period of America. So if a woman can't get a job, so then she has to partner with somebody just to support herself in this economy, she's not doing it because that's what she wants to do. She's doing it because she don't have any other choice. Right? So people got to really ask themselves what they're advocating for, because like I said, they're buying into this marketing piece around the lifestyle, but I don't think they really understand the day-to-day. Okay. And there's socioeconomic reasons why, in my opinion, we're never going back to this time period. In fact, it's going to get even more around people having their own autonomy and their own independence. Right. So people got to really understand that it doesn't really, it won't work that way because of how this socioeconomic system is set up. And there's nothing anybody can do about it, in my opinion. Some people may think they can, but I don't think they can. Right. So we talk about time period never coming back. So this idea ignores current reality and how capitalism shapes our perceptions in life. Sorry for the typo. So many people can't comprehend this current simulacra. Therefore, they create a simulacra that they can comprehend. And what I mean by simulacra is that we're not even living in reality anymore. We're living in essentially an extraction of a simulation of reality. So those videos you saw were not reality for most people until we got to a certain time period, and then they still were not reality for most people, right? Because you had to be in position, right? And you had to be in position to be able to maintain that lifestyle. So what a lot of people have done, and we see this on the internet, is they've created another false reality because they can't comprehend the current false reality that they're currently living in. So they just start making stuff up so their world can make sense to them. So they'll buy into the world to be better if people did this like they did what I believe they did 40, 50, 60 years ago. Because I can't deal with what's going on in the current world today, which is also a false perception of reality, right? So I want people to really understand that's kind of like what people are buying into. That's why I really don't entertain it, because when you sit the person down and we're going to give people opportunity to explain what they mean by this type of stuff, they can't even explain it because it's really not based on reality, because you're already living in a simulacra, which is a simulation of an actual simulation. So most people don't really know how the world actually works. They don't know how they got to this current point today. They just take pieces of stuff and they combine it into a gumbo and they say, okay, that's why the world works the way it does. So I think that's one of the things so they just keep coming up with stuff, right? So here's why this time period will never come back. And I want people to really understand this, because we're missing a lot of times the economic piece in our analysis. We're missing really understanding capitalism in our analysis. We think that things work a certain way that have nothing to do with the way things really work, right? So we think relationships are based around how men and women act. We don't understand that our idea and our concept of relationships in America have always been dominated by capitalism. So capitalism dictated what type of relationship you have. Just like when our people were on plantations, what did capitalism dictate the relationship? You can't get legally married because it is a negative impact on capitalism, right? So you can't get legally married, right? So I just think we extract how capitalism has shaped our relationship dynamics, right? And then we fill that with something else that has nothing to do with the reality. But let me give an example of why this particular time period is never going to come back. And I think people just have to kind of really wrap their head around it. This is also another piece from the 50s. So it's not from the 90s. It's not from the 2000s. It's not, during the feminist revolution in the 70s. This piece is from the 50s. So I think a lot of people, because they don't really want to do the legwork and do the history, they miss out on a lot of stuff. Let's go into this piece right here.
Today in the press and on the radio, the American career girl, married or single, is a favorite subject for discussion. One radio program which has explored the subject is What Makes You Tick, presided over by moderator John McCaffrey with the aid of two psychologists, Leon Aarons and Sidney Roslow.
All right, Miss Bates. We'd like to try to find out how determined a career girl you are. Now, if you'd please answer these questions, and here is your first question. How confident are you in business dealings with your superiors?
Oh, pretty confident, I think.
Well, now, do you ever feel like telling off the boss?
I certainly do.
Well, do you ever do it?
Well, not very often.
How capable do you feel yourself of handling any business emergency?
I think I'd be able to manage most any emergency.
Then you consider yourself a pretty efficient executive?
Yes, I think so.
Why, Miss Bates?
Well, I suppose it's because I feel I can make decisions fairly easily and, make them for others and tell them what to do. I've been doing that, for almost a year now, in a small way.
Do you feel that some girls have too much talent and ability to waste on a home and children?
Yes, I think many girls do. Some girls have a great deal to offer, and they certainly don't make any contribution to the business world, sitting home with their children or cooking dinner for their husband.
Go on, Miss Bates.
Well, many talented girls deserve a better life than that. They need that feeling of independence, of competition that they don't get at home. And they deserve the luxuries that they can buy with the money they earn.
Would you give up your career if the right man proposed?
No, I wouldn't. My career means too much to me.
Not even if your dream Prince Charming were the man?
I haven't met him. I don't think I'd give up my career even so.
Do you ever read love stories, Miss Bates?
Well, occasionally.
Do you ever picture yourself in the situation the heroine finds herself in?
Yes, I do sometimes.
Then you have thought about yourself in the character of a wife.
Yes, I have, but in a very detached sort of way. Never really seriously, of course.
Do you believe you'll realize your career ambitions within the next 5 years?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Miss Bates. Now we'll find out how determined a career girl our judges rate you. Dr. Roslow?
With 100 as the maximum possible rating, we rate Miss Bates at 62. She says she would not give up her career for marriage, yet she has a definite yearning for romance.
Miss Bates' determination to continue with her career obviously has not yet been severely tested.
Okay, and what I want people to really kind of ask themselves before we kind of go into this next transition, this is from the 50s. So you see in the 50s, this was on film, but at this time they were doing this on radio. Now some of us are gonna be like, I can't believe people sitting around listening to the radio. They had to because it was on television. So this is going out on radio, but you want to ask yourself, why in the 50s are they already talking about women going into the workplace? So they're already creating the programming, because all media is programming. This channel is programming. All media is designed to program you. So why in the 50s are we already starting to see the programming that it could be appropriate, and we're going to start having a conversation for women to start going into the workplace? And this is to say, when we don't really understand capitalism, we don't really understand the socioeconomic systems that we live in, we critique everybody else's, but we never learn about ours, right? We don't understand that the question you want to ask yourself is that why does capital want women to come into the workplace, right? Because before then, we got to understand we're coming out of an agricultural environment. We go into the Industrial Revolution. For the majority of the history of this country, the majority of labor, of work, was being done by men because of the type of jobs we needed to do. As we start to transition out of that, we're now letting more women into the workplace. But we're not doing it because we care about women. We're not doing it because of this girl power stuff. That's what we sell to women to get them to come in. See, we know before, what I told people before, most women work off arrogance. Most men work off pride. So how do you market to most women? You just market to their arrogance. Because that's women's baseline, is they're just going to be arrogant. So how do we get them? We market to their arrogance. So we make them think that we're doing something that's going to big them up to get them in. And they fall for it 95 times out of 100, right? But they're not doing it because they're trying to empower women. They're not doing it because of this girl power. They're doing it for specific reasons, because capital wants a specific type of environment, right? So let me show you this slide real quick, because maybe you can pick it up as we go through it. So here's from BLS, Women in the Workforce, right? So here's labor force participation of women 1950 to 2015. So we talked about that piece coming out in the 50s. So here was labor force participation of women, right, in 1950. What has labor force participation of women done? It kept going up. It peaked until 2000. It was 60% in 2000. It's projected to be in the, what we say, between 55% and 60%, right, going into the 2030s. So from 1950 to 1960, what do we see? We saw women's labor force participation rate just keep going up and keep going up and keep going up. So what does it mean? More and more women are coming into the workplace. More and more women are coming to the workplace. Capital's not bringing women to the workplace because they like women. They're not bringing women into the workplace because they're trying to do this girl power and you go girl thing. There's very specific reasons why capital wants to increase the labor pool. But because the average American gets maybe a semester of economics, K through 12, they can get a degree, an advanced degree, and a terminal degree, and have no understanding of the economic system that they live in. They can market this stuff to you, and you don't realize what you're participating in because you don't even understand what's going on around you, right? So you got to realize is that women's labor force participation rate has gone up since 1950s. But you see a piece in the 50s where they're starting to really program people that this is a lane women can go into. So this is not anything new. This is very old, right? But women today, especially younger women, they think they're talking about they think this is a new conversation. This is old conversation. right? And in 30 more years, it'll be a 100-year-old conversation that they've been having. Okay, let's keep going to the next one. So share of labor force held by women continues to grow. And I have this up on the comments on the banners. So in 1950, there were 18.4 million women in the labor force, which accounted for about 1/3 of the total labor force, right? In 2000, there were 66.3 million women in the labor force, which made around 46.5%. By 2015, the number of women in the labor force had increased by 73.5 million, comprising 46.8% of the overall labor force. According to BLS projections, the number of women in the labor force will increase to 77.2 million in 2024, which is what, a year from now, to 47.2% share. So here's another narrative on YouTube, is that Anglo women don't work. Okay, is that Anglo women don't work, right? There's around 17 million Black females in the whole United States. That's from 0 to 100 years old. I don't have the pullouts of age groups, but let's just take the whole 17 million. We can subtract that from the 77 million. So if we take every Black female inside the United States and make her a worker, make her a part of the labor force, then we pull her out, what number do we have left? Who are those women? So this idea that Anglo women don't work because their husbands make so much money, they can just take care of them, it doesn't support the numbers, right? It doesn't support the data doesn't support that narrative. It doesn't support that big idea, because once you take the 17 million, which is every Black woman inside the United States from ages 0 to ages 100, and we pull them out of the 77 million, who are the other people that are working? Is it all Hispanic women? Is it all Asian women? Right? So these are the things that you got to understand when you start actually looking at the actual data. And we see that women in the labor force are going to continue to increase throughout 2024, which is what, next year? They're going to be almost half of the people in the labor force. And they're not bringing those women in because they're trying to do some girl power, all women's thing. That's not what this is. Now, people can segment themselves amongst that, but capital doesn't care about that, right? Capital doesn't care. Capital doesn't care about any of that stuff. Capital cares about very specific things, and it's going to use you to get those things done. And you just got to ask yourself how much you want to participate in it. But capital doesn't care about that type of stuff, right? People that are looking to employ 100,000 people over the next 4 or 5 years, they're not playing that girl power stuff with you. They got to hit certain criteria because the particular organizations or the industries that they support need labor. That's all they think about. And how can they get that thing supported with the least amount of trouble as possible? And how can they get those supported at the lowest cost as possible? That's what they care about. You can go amongst your little silos and play them little games amongst each other. Nobody that really does this stuff cares about this type of stuff. Okay, let's go to the next one. So the goal of capital is extracting much value from labor as possible. That's the goal of capital, right? And I don't think people really understand that. So the goal of capital is extracting much value from labor as possible. Why? Because it helps them increase their profits. And we can go into a whole nother conversation about that. That's not really the tone of this argument. But capitalism is about competition. It's about competition for returns on capital. So if I'm running business ABC and I can extract more value from my labor as possible, I'm more valuable to investors and I'm more valuable to the capital structure than business 1, 2, 3 that cannot extract as much value from labor as possible, right? So one way to support that goal is to increase the labor pool. So this is something we talked about before. Capitalism needs surplus labor. It needs surplus labor. Why does capital need surplus labor? Because if I can continue to expand the labor pool, and most importantly, if I can expand the labor pool of unorganized workers, people that are not organized at all, what do? I make them compete against each other, and I also make them compete against themselves to get jobs. So most people go to a job and they're scared to even ask how much the job pays. Then they get on the job and they're scared to ask for a raise. Why? Because they're worried they're going to lose their job. So if I can continue to increase the labor pool, I can make that pool of workers compete against each other for the amount of jobs in the particular environment. So what will they do? They'll push the job down. They will push the income requirements down amongst themselves because why? They're going to compete against themselves. So it only makes sense to bring women into the labor pool. We're not doing it because we like women. We're not doing it because we got a women's initiative. We may tell you that, but that's not the real reason why we're doing it. We're not doing it because we care anything about women. We're doing it because it allows us to become more profitable. That's why we're doing it. Right? Now, you can go amongst your little silo groups and play your little games and create your own ecosystems and whatever you want to do. But capital doesn't care about anything. And when that doesn't work anymore, capital will cut women out of the labor pool and go in a different direction because capital only cares about what it cares about. So you got to really understand that. So the reason why in 1950 capital starts bringing more women into the labor pool is because why? Well, we can expand the amount of people working, and what can we do? We can lower the cost of people working. We can make them have to argue against each other and negotiate against themselves for jobs. So let me show you another slide real quick that I forgot from this particular slide. So here are men and women share of labor force 1950 to 2015 projected in 2024. Blue is percent of women in the labor force. Red is percent overall of men in the labor force. What are we seeing from 1950? Men in the labor force are starting to get smaller. Women are starting to get bigger. So what women don't understand is that by their participation in the labor force, they're pulling men out of the labor force. Right? And we're going to kind of go into the implications of that later. But as we bring more women into the labor force, what are we doing? We're pulling men out of the labor force. Because everybody can't get the same job. Right? And I think that's what most people don't understand. There was a time in this particular country where because of what we needed to do to get this country to a certain level, and because of the time period that we existed in, a lot of the jobs were extremely physical. They're extremely strenuous, things of that nature. Women don't want to do that kind of work. Many of them can't do it if they wanted to. You still don't see women volunteering to do high altitude construction. You don't see women volunteering to do underwater welding. You don't see women a lot of times volunteering to work on oil rigs. Why? Extremely dangerous, very physical, right? Stressful work. But for a very long time, the way this country was set up, that was the kind of work that needed to be done to get this country to a certain level. Once we've got this country to a certain level and we don't need that type of work anymore, we can now transition into another type of work. Now what can we do? We can expand the labor pool. And we can make those people start to compete against each other, right, for income. And they'll figure out how to knock each other off while we continue to get lower and lower income costs, right? And we're going to show you something else about how we're very productive, but the benefit of that productivity is not going back to workers, it's going back to capital, right? Let's keep going. So we bring women to the labor pool to increase the labor pool. That's what we talked about before, okay? You cannot reform this system and roll it back. We are in advanced stage capitalism. Now, let me go back to this point right here. Women of color and the gender gap and women of color and the wage gap. Sorry about that. We see that Black women make 64 cents for every dollar that white non-Hispanic men make. Multiracial Black women, which I don't even know that was a select, they make 63. Asian women make 101. And we're going to kind of talk about how Asian women are diversified. Multiracial Asian women make 98. Hispanic women, any race, make 57. So Black women make 64 cents for every $1 white men make, right? When we're talking about Asians, something that we do is we group them, and they're a very broad group of people. But if we're looking at this particular graph, we see that Thai women, Indian women, and Malaysian women make 121 for every dollar that white non-Hispanic men make, right? Chinese women make 103. Then it starts to go down. So when we talk about Asian women as this, this preferred archetype and this model minority, anybody that lives in certain part of the country know Cambodians don't function like Chinese people, right? Vietnamese people don't necessarily function like South Koreans because these are different ethnic groups. Many of them often have different religions. They have different cultures. So we group Asians in this really group, but we're looking at these select group of people. They make even more money than white men. Now, why do they do that? And we're going to kind of talk about it. It's because of, one, the fields that they go into for professional work. Then we're also going to talk about how for most white men, their wages have been flat over the past 20 years, but nobody talks about that, right? So it benefits them to bring women into the workplace in this particular country because for America, the majority of the industrialization has already been built out. So we need to maintain it, but we don't have to build it anymore. We already built it. Other parts of the world, they got to literally build their whole country. So we don't need men to do all this type of work anymore. So we can now bring women in and make men and women compete against each other to get these jobs. Well, for a very long time, a lot of the jobs that needed to be done, women didn't want to do them jobs anyway. So you had to find something for them to do. So what do? Just make them homemakers. And you get them to buy into the idea of being the best homemaker they could be, to make that man comfortable so he can go back out there and do that work. If we ever go back to that period, we won't be able to use women anymore. So let's say that we have this massive catastrophe inside the United States that destroys all our infrastructure. Well, women ain't gonna want to do that work. People are gonna say, well, yeah, women worked in factories during World War II. Yeah, how long was World War II? Men did a certain type of work in America for over 300 years. Men didn't just build this country in 5 years. Men did certain types of labor in this country for literally well over 200 to 300 years. So I want you to understand that women do not have a track record in America of doing a certain type of work for an extended period of time. They did it in an emergency, but also a lot of men also did that work too, right? Because the West Coast was filled with factories of men building armaments for the military during World War II. It wasn't just women doing it, but we go again, that's the marketing, right? What's the name? So-and-so the Riveter. I forgot her first name. It might have been Ronnie. This is marketing to do what? To draw women into the workplace so they can go to work, right? So I want you to kind of understand this idea of bringing women to the workplace. It has nothing to do with women. It has everything to do with capital, right? So Notary says, where are black men compared to white men and other races of men? So what you can do is you can go to BLS. You can look up pay, right? It'll show you weekly pay. And it'll show you black men, white men, black women, yada, 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 right? So you can go to BLS. We talked about it on this show multiple times, extensively, because we had to kind of get rid of the narrative that black women make more money than black men, right? But you can go to BLS. You can look at that data, right? But salute to you. Big up to you. I appreciate the question. Let's go to the next one. You can't reform the system. You can't roll it back with advanced stage capitalism. There is no, we're going back to this particular time period. It's not going to happen. If you want to create that environment, go get your people, get your money together, go buy an island in the Bahamas. Bahamas to sell you an island if you got the millions, and go create your own ecosystem. Now, I don't know how you're going to build anything, right? But do what you do. But there is no rolling this thing back. There's no reforming it. It won't work, right? This is going to keep going forward until it crashes. But there's no rolling this back. And so this idea that we're going to all go into this traditionalist thing again, it won't happen, because capitalism has decided that that particular environment no longer works for capitalism. It doesn't work for capitalism to have women in the home. It works for capitalism to have women working. So they're going to work. So women get trained to work at a very young age. They get trained to work. So you trying to tell a woman not to work, you're going against her training, because she's been trained to work at a very young age, because it benefits capitalism. Because capitalism wants to continue to expand the labor pool. That's why they bring women over. That's why they bring over, people might be old to remember the Filipinos coming over here to do nursing. And we're going to kind of talk about that, because capitalism needs them. So here in this particular women of color, do I have it? We ain't going to go into that. Let's go into this right here. Do I have it? Okay, so top occupations held by women of color in the United States by racial and ethnic group: Black African-American women. Top occupation is nursing assistants. Second top occupation is going to be cashier. Third occupation is going to be customer service representatives. Fourth occupation is going to be registered nurses. Fifth going to be personal care aides. Okay? So if we can get women to do these jobs and compete against men to do these jobs, it benefits capitalism. Because why? There's more people doing the job. So if you're a man and you're trying to be a customer service rep, you're competing against women to do this particular job. So it used to be, if you went in a Home Depot, right, there may be female cashiers, but there wouldn't be female customer service reps, because what do they know about building and things of that nature? Now you go to Home Depot, there's female customer service reps, right? You now call a company and do their customer service. You're getting transferred to a phone support team in Asia, and you may get on the phone a male or a female, who knows? So capitalism, not only does it outsource the labor to Asia, which is cheaper, it also employs men and women in Asia to make the work even cheaper. So we increase the labor pool by going overseas, and then we increase the labor pool over there by employing men and women as customer service reps. But we see, based on racial and ethnic group, what particular occupations they have. We talked about the Filipino women coming over here in the 90s and taking all the nursing jobs. So capitalism decided it makes sense to import this group of women over here to do these jobs because why? The women that are currently over here doing these jobs, they want too much money. So we can find some Filipino women to do the same job cheaper, and they'll keep doing that over and over again. It won't stop, right? Unless you get a president that's going to close the borders and not allow and create some type of economic protectionism, it's not going to stop. And so this is what people really need to understand. You're not going to roll this thing back. It's only going to continue to keep moving forward. Let's go to the next one. White men's wages are flat unless they're in the 90th percentile. So the narrative that you just need to go find an Anglo man and you can live this lifestyle, well, their wages are flat. Unless they're in the 90th percentile, which means they're the top 10% income earners, right? What nobody's talking about is everybody's wages are flat. They're either going down or they're flat because white men's wages are flat. And white men are the highest paid men, even though we saw that Asian women in certain industries make more money than white men. They make like a little bit over the dollar amount. But white men's wages are flat. So everybody is dealing with this because why? The labor pool continues to expand. America continues to bring over workers more and more. And once you develop a category and you start asking for too much money, they replace you with somebody else. We saw this with the tech guys. Everybody from tech making the money. Well, let's go get these Indians and bring them over here with them H-1B1 visas. Why? Because we're going to undercut you because you're not organized. Everybody is operating as an independent contractor. So they're going to undercut you. Now you have to negotiate against not only people in America, you have to negotiate against foreigners who will work cheaper than you, right? Because they just want to get into this deal. They don't have the same expectations of their job than you do. Some of these people just want to get work. So even when you're a highly skilled, trained person, you got to deal with the same situation. And they will continue to expand the labor pool. Because if America ever lowers its visa standards, you'll get way more people over here working. America has very high standards to get a visa here. If they ever lower them, you get way more people over here working. A lot of these people are going to be very highly skilled, professional people, and they'll be working in America, and they'll take way less. So here's wages in the U.S. Wages increase in the U.S. rise to the top earners. We see that 90% percentile of earners, it is going up, but it's relatively flat. And I forgot what year that's from on the graph, but it's going across decades, right? But we see wages are pretty much flat for everybody. Okay. Now, why are wages flat? Is because Americans are very productive, but the productivity is not being given back to capital. I'm sorry, it's not being given back to workers. So we see wages, workers produce much more, but typical workers' pay lag far behind. Disconnect between productivity and typical workers' compensation, 1940 to 2013. We see that productivity goes up, hourly compensation staying flat. So what I'm talking about is that the American worker is very, very productive. They're producing more and more. They're using automation. They're using machinery. They're using tech to produce more. But the productivity and the benefit of the productivity is staying on the side of capital. It's not going back to workers. So workers' wages are flat. Then what else are they doing? They're bringing more and more people into the labor pool. Right? So you're competing against more and more people for your job. You're being more productive just to keep your job. The value of your productivity, the benefit of your productivity is staying with capital. Right? So that 1% is becoming even more and more wealthier. And that other 99%, they're just flat. And you can go look, white male wages are flat inside. They've been flat over the past few decades. And it doesn't mean because that money's going to other people. No, the money's going to capital. Because what a lot of black people don't understand, and there's an elite of every group. So the average white person that you see walking down the street, they're not part of elite white people. Right? I was reading an article, a guy in Houston was a multi-billionaire, and he's not even the richest person in Houston. So you're a multi-billionaire living in Houston. You're not even the richest person in Houston. So that means Houston has people that are even worth way more billions than this other guy. But black people, because of their lack of exposure to a lot of things, they just think every white person they meet is part of this elite class because of the premium that they put on white skin. Right? So they believe that. So their attitude is, if I just get attached to any white person, that's better than being with black folks. But those white people are really not doing that well. They're just doing better than you, but they're really not doing that well. And I'm going to kind of show you what I'm talking about. because a lot of them not even doing better than you. So here's the states with the largest white population. West Virginia, 97, Wyoming, 93, Vermont, 92, Maine, 92, New Hampshire, 91, Iowa, 90, Kentucky, 87. I didn't even know Kentucky had an 87% white population. I thought we was in the South. Oregon, 87%. So the narrative that you just need to go find you a white partner, this is what you got to understand. His median income, West Virginia, right? Individual, 26, household, 48. I make more as an individual than median household in West Virginia. So if the narrative was that all you need to do is just get around some Anglos, you can go to these states with the largest Anglo population, but the state with the largest Anglo population, they household median is only 48. I'm not trying to brag. I ain't trying to put nobody down. I ain't trying to put myself above nobody. But I do more than that as an individual. Right? But the richest person in West Virginia, me and them are not even in the same universe. And 9 times out of 10, 99% of the chance they're going to be an Anglo. So you got to understand is that there's levels to a lot of stuff. But we've been programmed to think if I just can get somebody that represents that person, but it's levels to everything. Right? Because there's an elite group out of every group. Let's go to the next one. So if I'm capital, I want to replace unskilled or semi-skilled labor with women who I can pay less than men. See, that's what I want to do. If I'm capital, I want to go find unskilled or semi-skilled labor and replace them with women. Why? Because I can pay you less than a man. Why? Because you'll accept it. See, because we saw what black women, only person that they make more than is Native American women who, to my opinion, I don't really know how many of them even work. No disrespect to them. I just don't know how many of them even work. And Hispanic women. So go fill the job with black women. They make less than black men. They make less than white women. They make less than white men. I can increase the labor pool, get the same production, pay them less money. Take that money, return it to my shareholders, and take that money, sink it back into operations to go make more money. Right? And that's how this game works. It don't work another way. Like, that's just how this game works. If I'm capital, I want to replace unskilled or semi-skilled labor with women who I can pay less than the women I previously had in that position. So I got Anglo women in a particular position. Go hire black women because they make less than Anglo women, but they got equivalent education. Now, the Anglo women are going to fight to keep black women out because they don't want to lose their jobs. But that's what capital would do. So they're not doing these initiatives because they like black women. They're doing it is because why? I can hit 2 points. I can hit a woman and a black person and also still pay them less. So as a result, I can get everybody to compete against each other while lowering labor costs, which is going to equal more profit. So I take all these different groups of people, get them to compete against each other as unorganized labor, right? They'll drive the actual price down of labor amongst themselves. I benefit from that and equals more profit. So they don't let women into the labor force because they like them. But the question is, how can somebody be a homemaker if they're being driven into the labor force as a necessity to make their money? And then as we drive into the labor force, we pay them even less money. Right? So we convince them and they have to go into the labor force and support themselves. Then once I get you in here, I'm going to pay you less money. That's the game. But when you don't understand, what I've seen this a million times, people will get into stuff and don't know what they get into. I told people for years, I've been telling people, the cocaine game is a murder game. Why don't you know it's the murder game? Because you ain't never sold enough dope. So you think it's just this little hand. No, the cocaine game is the murder game. The reason why you don't know it's the murder game is because you ain't never sold enough. So that part of the game ain't never showed up. So the problem with a lot of our people is because where we're at in the socioeconomic structure, we don't ever get a peek of how it really works. So we build this whole reality around all this stuff that we think is what's really going on because you ain't never got a peek behind that curtain. And when they give you a peek behind that curtain, you'll see something totally different. Then you'll realize, okay, this was really going on. This was really going on, not all this stuff I thought was going on. See? But they never going to show you that because why? Why would they show you how they make the sausage? So they just let you think whatever you want to think. As long as you keep taking your ass to work and taking that low money. You can do whatever you want to do after that. If I'm capital, I want to fill an industry with skilled female labor who work for less. However, I get the same productivity because higher profits. If I'm a Fortune 500 company, I fill my job full of skilled female labor. Why? You're going to work for less money. Why would I pay men to do the job that I can get you and you pay you less? And all I got to do is put on the wall girl power, black girl magic. We have arrived. Put some Michelle Obama pictures up there and you're going to be happy. And I'm going to make all the profit. And I'm going to return all that profit back to my shareholders. I'm going to take that profit single back in operations to make even more money. Right? So that's what I would do. But they do sometimes have a ethnic, how would I say, loyalty where they won't do that. But that's what I would do. I would do that in 5 minutes and sit back and cake off. But I'm different than a lot of other people. So here's some of the questions I think people want to kind of ask themselves around this particular topic, right? That to me aren't being asked. And if you want to come up later on, we can have a discussion about these questions. In talking about this nostalgia, women working, men needing to be, the breadwinner, the women needing to be a homemaker. Why does a man need to make more money than a woman to be valid as a partner? If everybody is in the economy competing against each other for labor, why does the man need to make more money to be valid as a partner? This ain't 1955. We're in 2023. We're getting ready to be in 2030 in like 7 years. In 7 years, I'm sorry. Why are we still making it a requirement for a man to make more money than a woman to be valid as a partner? And we're going to get a little bit deeper into this. But where does this come from in 2023? Why do we have a contingent of women? And why do men even feel like the only way I'm valid in a relationship is if I make more money than my partner? Why do we still think this in this environment where we have a workplace full of women? And the question is, why are women advocating to be equal to men, but then turn around and tell the men they got to make more money than them? Right? I don't understand this. So why are women advocating to be on the same level as men and then turn around and saying, I need men to make more money than me to be valid as a partner? Right? And let's go a little bit deeper into this. How were men supposed to take care of women if they're being pushed out of the labor market by women? And I learned this from this chick. It's a sister. She went to Harvard out of Memphis. And she kind of broke this down, right? Because she is against this narrative. Like she wants to be the stay-home woman, yada, yada, yada. But she talked about it. She got a Harvard degree, which I told her it don't make sense to get that degree and don't use it, but that's her business. If women are coming into the labor market and they're taking jobs that men historically have held or men could hold, how are men therefore then supposed to turn around and take care of women? How are they supposed to do it? See, so I don't get this. So if I wanted somebody to do something, I would get out of the way and let them do it. What I wouldn't do is get in their way and turn around and say, well, the reason why I can't deal with you because you haven't done this. Well, why don't I get out of the way and let you do it? So it's a contradiction in words and behavior. Where women are saying, this man is only valid if he can take care of me. He got to make it, a number above what I'm making for me to think he's valid, for me to be up under his direction. But then I go out into the labor force and try to push him out of the labor force. So this don't make no sense. Right? That's like somebody telling me, only way you'll date me is if I play for this particular team, and then when I go to tryouts, you trying out for the team too. Well, what you doing here? I'm trying to make the team. You need to fall back and let me make the team. Right? So this don't really add up, but it don't have to add up because you stuck in this system and you don't even realize what you're doing. So you're competing against the same people that you say you want to be successful for them now to be valid. This don't make no sense. But it don't have to make sense. People just got to keep doing it. Right? We talked about it again. Why are some women proclaiming they want high earners while competing with the same men they want to partner with in a labor market that has lower wage growth, flat wage growth year to year? So we talked about that. Where do we have that again? Where is that at? So lower wage growth, flat wage growth year to year, 02, 06, 10, 14, 18. Only one's going up is the top 10%. 75% going up a little bit, median, 25 percentile, 10 percentile, all laying flat, right? So this is where you're going to find the majority of the people. So wage increases are going flat, and we know that wage increases are never going to be in proportion to inflation, right? But we have women saying they want these top earners while competing with the same men that they claim they want to partner with in a labor market that has lower wage growth, flat wage growth year to year. This don't make economic sense. So once you bring the economic piece in, you realize none of this makes sense, right? It's like somebody telling me they want to make the team, but you don't never go to the trial. Well, how you going to make the team? They're just going to put you on the team, right? If you got it like that, you do. If not, then you got to go try out like everybody else. So this is the questions you can never ask, because I can never get none of these people on my show to have a discussion around this desire to go after this particular man in society that makes over a certain amount of money while you're competing with that same man. So he has to not only beat other men, he got to beat you to now be available to you so you can be a homemaker, right? Or if you're a man, you're dealing with this because you believe that the only way you're valid is if you can make so much money your wife don't have to work, right? But the question is, why does that make you valid? What else about you makes you valid to be in a relationship except that one part of you? Because there's no guarantee that's going to last forever. So what else about you is valuable? Okay. Do men realize they're competing against men and women for economic survival when they're looking for work? This is something I said black men are not educated on, right? This is something I say they're not educated on. You're competing against men and women for economic survival looking for work because why? Everybody's trying to take your job. So when you go out into the economy and you're applying for a job, so let me give an example. So a lot of people on this channel and a lot of people that's linked up with Erica know about the tech position. Let's say we got tech position XYZ. We got 50 positions open at company 123. We got 50 positions open. We got 100 women apply. We got 100 men apply. It's 50 positions. So what does it mean? Those 100 men and those 100 women are competing for those 50 positions. So this narrative that men should never compete with women is false. Men are going to have to drop women on their head. That's a reality. That's an economic reality. You as a man are going to have to drop women on their head. Why? Because you're competing against them for economic survival. Because there was a time in this country where a woman could not get certain type of jobs. If you go back to IBM 60 years ago, there were no women working in IBM unless they were secretaries. Now a woman can get a job working at IBM. A woman can get a job working at Google. A woman can get a job working at Amazon, right? A woman can get a job working in the tech space. Because why? It's very much skilled brain work. It's not physical labor, right? She can support, she can do server support. She can do cybersecurity. Why? It's brain work. It's not labor. So because so much of this work now is brain work, we can bring more women in and we can bring them in and pay them less money. We can bring in foreigners and pay them less money. So many women, many men, but especially black men, you're never going to roll this thing back. So this desire to roll this thing back is a waste of time, right? You're not going to roll it because you don't have control over it to roll it back. See, the NFL could take things out of their game because why? They control the whole game. It's their game. They control it. You don't control this game. So you can't roll it back. You got to go with what the game is. But we're not telling men, but especially black men, that you're competing against women for economic survival. Because what happened is you're trying to get one of those 50 positions. You don't get it. Then the woman going to call you a bum because you lost the competition to her. So that's why you got to learn. You got to just start dropping people on their head. Because that's the only way you're going to have anything out here. And you just got to deal with your group. Now, people are going to be like, Dave, that's a very over-the-top statement. It's not when somebody is advocating to take everything from you. Then they're going to tell you how they took everything from you. So you got to understand what game you're playing, right? So that's why I don't do a lot of this other stuff, because it's not reality. It's false. They've created a world to make everybody compete against each other, right? So if that's what we're doing, then that's what we're doing. You not desiring to compete and you letting somebody tell you, well, you a man, you shouldn't be competing against women. Well, why is a woman trying to apply for the same job I'm trying to get if I'm not supposed to be competing against women? So if they told women you can only get this segment of jobs and I never had to worry about them applying for the same job, that's something different. But when women have advocated for, and I'm not against it, I'm for it, right? I'm for having the best brain power on the situation. But as a result, it puts women in competition for men for economic survival. So if that's what we're doing, and that's what we're doing. And I don't think people really understand that. And I'm not one of the people that I have like these petty competition type stuff. I'm talking about on a larger scale, right? On a larger scale, if you're competing in a labor force against women to get opportunity, you have to understand that's what you're doing. You can't make it into something else. You can't, have this idea that we're going to roll this thing back to 1955. It's not going to happen, right? And so if your family needs you to be competitive for you to be successful, then you got to compete against whoever they play and put in front of you. Just like they say in football, just play your schedule. Don't worry about nothing else. Just play the people they put in front of you. And at the end of the season, you'll see how it fall out. But this idea that men are not supposed to compete with women, capitalism has created an environment where men have to compete with women just to survive, just to pay your rent, just to feed your family, just to put food in your stomach, just to send your kids to college, just to make sure your kids can live in a decent neighborhood. You have to compete. And not only you got to compete, you got to outcompete them. And that's just what it is. So you have to realize is that the goal is to make sure that certain groups of people are never going to be competitive. So then the women of their group never have to compete with those men, right? But you're competing against men, not only men, but also women. So we're going to keep going because I don't want to sit on that point too long. Do men realize they need to specialize in heavy or dangerous labor positions or extremely highly skilled positions to not have their wages being pulled down by the average woman? So we talked about women of color. If you're a man, you can't be in any of these jobs. If you're a man, you can't be in any of these jobs. You can't be a nursing assistant. You don't want to be a cashier unless you're like starting out in the labor pool. You don't want to be a customer service rep unless you're starting out in the labor pool. You don't want to be a registered nurse. You don't want to be a personal care aide. Why? Because you're competing against women for this profession, and they're going to pull down your income because capital can bring these women in, and they already are going to accept less money. Right? So what you have to understand is that you may have to specialize in a heavy or dangerous labor position that women don't want to do, because women don't want to do every job. They want to do certain jobs. They don't want to do every job. They really don't. That's why you don't see them applying for it, because they don't want to do really heavy or dangerous stuff. And I'm talking about a critical mass when I'm talking about no one individual woman, right? They really don't want to do it, right? Or extremely highly skilled positions that most people can't do, right? There's stuff in tech that's going to be extremely highly skilled. There's stuff in medicine that's going to be extremely highly skilled. There's stuff in STEM, and you still going to find some women in those positions because they have the intellectual ability to do it, but you're not going to find the average woman in those positions. You're not going to find the average woman as a cardiologist, right? You're not going to find the average woman as a surgeon. You're not going to find the average woman working in oncology. You're not going to even find the average woman as a nurse practitioner. So as a man, you have to understand that you got to go into something that's going to be very dangerous labor or extremely highly skilled to get women out of your job category, right? Because they're being brought in to push down the cost of doing that particular job. And it's not to be derogatory to women. This is how capital works. It wants to continue to increase the labor pool as large as possible because we can drive down the cost of labor because we're going to make those people compete against each other. So we don't blame feminism for capitalism. I don't even believe in feminism. I believe in capitalism. And when I say I believe in it, I believe that's the reason why things are happening. I don't believe that nothing we're seeing going on inside the United States is feminism. I don't believe it. I believe it's capitalism because I understand capitalism. And without capitalism, you don't have all these feminist thinkers talking in circles, not making a lot of sense, calling everything patriarchy, right? On the internet built by government. So meaning it was built by tax dollars, right? And writing fantasy novels. And when I say fantasy novels, writing these books that halfway don't make no sense, right? How would they support themselves if they could not make money in the economy, right? There is no feminism in Bangladesh because the economy can't support that. There's no feminism in the Congo because the economy can't support it because they don't have an advanced enough capitalism or any kind of market-based system to support women in the labor pool because of their stage of development that they're currently at. So I don't sit on here and talk about, feminism did this to the woman and capitalism took the woman out of the home because they wanted her as a worker, right? They ain't got nothing to do with feminism. You saw feminism in the 70s after we talked about before, when women started to go into the workplace. Let's go back up here. We started seeing it in the 50s, right? So around here is when you started having a lot of women talk about feminism, but it was already bringing women in because they already wanted them. See? So when you had this, the NRA and that little feminist movement in the mid to late 70s, we was already accelerating women into the labor pool. Because why? Capitalism wanted to continue to increase its labor pool. They didn't do it because they like women. And so that's what you want to understand. There's no such thing as feminism. It's capitalism. We live in America, right? These people are about money. And they're about making money. And it's only about making money. It ain't about nothing else. This stuff that y'all is caught up into, these people don't even have conversations about this type of stuff. Capitalism is about growth. It's about outcompeting people for access to capital. It's about running other people out of business, right? And it's about making sure that you keep the benefit of productivity and you give as little as that benefit to labor. That's what it's about in America. And we're in an advanced stage of capitalism where we don't need men to do a lot of the work that we needed men to do 50 years ago. And in 50 years from now, we're going to need less men and women to do any work. You're going to need less people to do any work because of the advanced stage of capitalism that we're in. Right? So I would encourage people to figure out how they're going to be relevant in this economy in the next 20 years, instead of trying to figure out how they're going to roll back to this time period, unless you're going to go buy you a piece of land somewhere in America and just homestead. And you can do that. But if you're going to live in these major metropolitan areas, in these major cities, you're going to have to go along with what the trend is. Don't mean you got to change your morals, your values, and your principles. But this idea that, this lady's going to sit at home and she's just going to do that, it doesn't work, because most white women work because of the cost of living, right? And the white man wants her to work because most white people are married to white people, so she brings that money back home to him, into their family, right? There is no group of women based on ethnic group that just sit at home and become homemakers now. Not in America. Everybody has to work, even if they just got to work part-time, but they got to do something to bring some kind of money in because of the cost of living. It's not everybody, but it is for the majority of Americans. We talked about before. We take the 17 million black women, we pull them out of the 77 million women in the labor force, right? How many million women are those left? And you tell me what ethnic group those women belong to. And you can go figure that out by trying to figure out what is the number of women in other ethnic groups that are still inside the United States. So this idea that black women are the only group of women in the labor pool, it don't match up numbers. And we do numbers here. We just don't do like what I think when I wake up today and then tomorrow I think something. We try to really use the numbers to try to give us an understanding of what the story that's being told. Right? And that's kind of what I want to get you to understand. So when you start to really understand about how capitalism actually works, what the goal of capitalism is, what its intent is, and what its objectives are, you understand what's going on in the world around you, because this particular environment is controlled by what capitalism and what capital wants to happen. And it's always been that way since we've been born. Right? If you're under 80 years old, there's never been a time in your life in America in which capital has not dictated what you saw on television, what you saw in media, what you was taught in school, yada, yada, yada. It dictates it all. Because the goal is for you to participate in what it wants. Right? So you got to really understand that. So this is what I'm going to do real quick as we go through the comments. If we have any questions, you got any comments, you got any disagreements about what I talked about, because like I said, I can't never get none of these people to pop up on none of my broadcasts. You could come in. We put that in the comments real quick. You could come through. We're going to read these comments and we're going to get up on out of here. Let me pin that. Okay, so it's pinned. And let's get up on out of here. So let's go through the super chats real quick. Ray Gun, man. Appreciate the $2, man. Big up to East Atlanta. I was just over there earlier today. Leo Johnson, appreciate the $1.99. Jason Wood, appreciate the $5. Miss Tora Helms, appreciate the $5. Thanks for the great content. I appreciate it. Miss Jallo, appreciate the $10. Ron's, appreciate the $4.99. I joined your course in Patreon off the strength of the value delivered here. Thanks for the example, setting the bar high. I appreciate it, man. Miss Tora Helms, appreciate the $2 super sticker. And Cheryl, we're in the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, appreciate the $4.99. So let's get ready. Let's go through it. Miss Phoenix, what's going on? Big up to Toledo, Ohio. Big up to Palouspa, Washington. I don't know where that's at, but big up to Washington State. Miss Brandy L. She was at Erica's event. Very, very nice person. What's going on, Miss Brandy L? Miss Lady L, what's going on with you? Hope everything is well. So Journey to Jasmine says the people on a healthy dose of Jim Crow with that 1950s lifestyle. I don't think they realize that's what was going on. And I think some of them think they're going to marry out of it. So I think some of them believe that if they just marry the right person, they won't have to deal with that type of stuff. And the other side of it, I don't think they realized that what was going on. Because in the 1950s, most Black people weren't living that type of lifestyle because of what was going on in our society. But like I said, this is an ahistorical perspective on the world. You know, so it's just, you know, stuff people believe on the internet, man, is interesting, to say the least. Right? I'm not going to knock it, but it's very interesting. Okay, so we got Mr. Raygun come through. Go here. Let me put my mic in. What's going on, man? You can hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. I just got a quick question. Could you go over that the semi word you used earlier, and also could you spell it out for me? Because I've just never heard that term used before, and it seemed very interesting.
What was the word again?
It was you used earlier. I think it was on one of the slides. I think it was similac or semi. It was
simulacra. Simulacra.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's a book that you can read. Oh, my bad. I'm going the wrong way. So there's a book that you can read called Simulacra and the Simulation. It's put out by a French philosopher.
Okay.
And it can kind of break down what it is. So I got a video on that. I got a video of that on my Patreon.
Okay.
So like, have you ever been to Busch Gardens in Tampa?
No, sir.
Okay, so what Busch Gardens is in Tampa is like it's a theme park one, but it's supposed to also represent an African safari.
Okay.
But it's not really the African safari, it's a simulation of an African safari. Yes. Right? So then, so we you got a real African safari that you're actually going in Africa. We got Busch Gardens, which is a simulation of what we want to believe an African safari is to the people that's never been on one. Then we can create a simulacra, which is a simulation of a simulation.
Gotcha.
So most people, the world they're living in is not even a simulation of reality. It's a simulation of another simulation.
Okay.
So when the simulation that they're dealing with of an actual simulation don't make sense, they just make something up.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that book is really good. You see a lot of this with in marketing. You see a lot of it in products. Another example would be I don't know if you ever go to the vegan part of your frozen environment. So like they'll sell you fake chicken wings, but they're really vegan. So it's a simulation of chicken. It's a simulation of chicken. But what's going to come after that is a simulacra, which is a simulation of the simulation of chicken. So everything is a step further from a reality.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what that means. So that's a really good book. I don't really recommend it. It's for people, and I know you can handle it because I don't talk to you before. I know your level of intelligence. For people that really want to get deep into like philosophy.
No, I'm definitely going to check it out. It definitely has me intrigued.
Yeah, because I
appreciate you, brother.
No problem, man. Appreciate it. Stay safe out there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, peace.
Back in the chat.
All right.